No, it's not exactly the same as the Trump situation, but it's in the same lane. And we were just lectured for the past year about what a hideous crime it is to take top secret documents out of the White House and store them at an unsecured private facility. There are actually Biden defenders online right now trying to distinguish between the fact that, well, these were at an office because it was Biden's, quote, think tank at the University of Pennsylvania. That's different than being in an office at President Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago. I mean, it's absurd. If he had top secret documents at his think tank, unprotected, unlike the ones at Mar-a-Lago by any Secret Service, et cetera, then they've got some splaining to do. And we're entitled to an answer as to why they've known it since November 1st, and we only get to know it January 10th. Kmele, thoughts on that? I see you're shaking your head.
Well, I mean, it strikes me that there's always a bit of kind of partisanship in these controversies, whether it's Hillary Clinton with her damn emails and everyone saying, oh, it's obviously nothing going on here, or Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago and they say, oh my God, you need a SWAT team to come in and take a look at this. Now it becomes the Republicans' opportunity to insist that we need to do something about this, anything right now, and Democrats' opportunity to say, of course, there's nothing to see here. The only consistency with respect to the handling of classified documents that you're likely to get from anyone is when it is a person who isn't in power and they get stuck or stung for having classified documents or handling them in a way that isn't necessarily consistent with the law. Those people generally don't get any sort of special or preferential treatment. They're generally not subjected to the same sort of opportunity to simply be immune to whatever prohibitions exist on the way that these documents are handled. And ultimately, what I would love to see isn't merely some consistency, is an appreciation for the fact that we probably overclassify things in this country, and as a result end up wasting a bunch of time having kind of these ridiculous, like haphazard sort of scandals where we don't even know what the substance of the documents are, only that, oh no, it's classified material. So, you know, a little bit of consistency would be great, but the better thing to do here is to think about what this actually says about classification and overclassification in the U.S.
That's a great point. And by the way, unlike a president, a vice president can't declassify documents. And these were from his vice presidential think tank. No reason to believe he as president went back and declassified them. So they appear to be legitimately classified and never declassified. That's why the lawyers found them and handed them in. And I realize that's different than what happened in the Trump case, where it was the National Archivist who figured out we were missing classified documents, went knocking on the door at Mar-a-Lago effectively, and then was kind of told that they were complying, and there are real questions about whether they were in returning the documents. I get it. However, you and I both know there's zero chance, next to zero, I'll give it a 2% chance, the Biden lawyers would have called any attention to these documents had we not just been through the Trump fiasco. They would have let them sit in these cabinets untouched, just like every other president has done, because I think in general there was sort of he wants his little note from Kim Jong-un, you know, like that's, you know, like only with Trump. I think, you know, Jim Jordan's already out saying different rules for Trump versus everybody else. That's in general true. And I think that general motivation is what pisses people off about the Mar-a-Lago raid. And now, here's the greatest absurdity to Kmele's point about like, can we just kind of understand in general that we're maybe overclassifying stuff? Now, the Department of Justice has opened an investigation. The FBI is also involved. There could be a special counsel appointed, as they did in the case of Donald Trump. Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, has assigned the U.S. Attorney in Chicago to review the documents. The U.S. Attorney in Northern Illinois is now looking at this. I'm not sure why it's Illinois, given that this is all happening, I think, at the University of Pennsylvania. But in any event, that's absurd. Like, this to me is crazy. Now, because they overreached in the case of Trump, let's go back to Carter's still alive. Let's go see what's in his drawers, so to speak.
That is an image, Megyn, that I really want to scrub.
What's in Jimmy Carter's drawers?
I want to classify that.
It's like the worst reality show ever.
Although, you know what, it speaks to one other thing, just to build on what Kmele was saying, is that another problem with presidential papers is that they're supposed to be at some point declassified, and they're not being. I mean, we had a whole dumb media bubble about a week or two ago about the declassification or lack thereof of some of the JFK assassination stuff. And it's like, dude, it's 60 years ago. Like, there is nothing in there that we need to keep secret anymore. It's not going to show something that isn't true. It's not going to prove your theory about it. But it's probably going to show that, some agency, some three-letter agency was trying to cover their ass at some point. Let's just go ahead and not overclassify all of those papers too. I think an important distinction between the three cases that we're talking about here, I think the Hillary Clinton case and the Donald Trump case have way more in common than this one does, which is to say both of them showed by their actions and their descriptions of their actions that they were trying to take information that didn't necessarily belong to them, trying to minimize it and trying not to cough it back up when asked about it, which is very different than, oh, look, we found this in the file and we're going to hand it over immediately. I don't know about the motivation. I suspect that you might be right, Megyn, but it's speculation about like, oh, we better make this look good because we're giving Trump such a hard time of it, in which case, that's okay. I mean, if you're going to follow the law better than you were otherwise, I'm decently happy with that motivation. But I think it's important, and a lot of the Jim Jordan comments and Kevin McCarthy comments are really juvenile, which is not surprising coming from these guys. Trying to make it seem like exactly the same. It's not exactly the same. Just not.
No, it's not the same.
There was a lot of negotiations and back and forth between the Trump people. There's a lot of lawyers said this, and then that didn't turn out to be true. None of this is apparent in this case. I suspect that
here's why it's a story. Here's why it's a story. Remember Biden on 60 Minutes after the Trump Mar-a-Lago story was revealed. Look at this.
When you saw the photograph of the top secret documents laid out on the floor at Mar-a-Lago, what did you think to yourself, looking at that image?
How that could possibly happen, how anyone could be that irresponsible. And I thought, what data was in there that may compromise sources and methods? By that I mean names of people who helped, or et cetera. And it's just totally irresponsible.
How could that happen? And by the way, just as a refresher, the reason that infamous picture of the Trump documents at Mar-a-Lago were fanned out on the floor is because the FBI did that. Trump did not take them out of the boxes. That was the FBI who did that for a good photo. And Joe Biden knew that. He wasn't referring to the fact that the documents were splayed out. And if he was wrong, because it was FBI who did that. But he was referring to the fact that Trump had classified documents down at Mar-a-Lago. What sources and methods could be in there? You know what he had? Top secret documents with the sensitive compartmented information designation known as SCI, which is used for highly sensitive information obtained from intelligence sources. So it's a story. I don't really give a damn that they're not exactly the same. He has some explaining to do, and he has effectively compromised himself in his fight against Trump when it comes to what happened at Mar-a-Lago. And no amount of window dressing, I'm treating them both the same, by Merrick Garland, is going to be able to rehabilitate that weakness now. I mean, he's definitely going to come to the conclusion that Joe Biden didn't violate any law. Joe Biden's fine. Joe Biden had no intent. Joe Biden cooperated with the feds. Nothing to see there. And he's going to come to a different conclusion, we think, in the Trump case. But he's been hamstrung as a result of this. This is a public nightmare. It's an embarrassment, a PR nightmare now for Merrick Garland, because Trump at every turn is going to say, Joe Biden had top secret information sitting there for how many years now? In a place that he's pointing out already has received, not the think tank, but the university, $54 million from China, right? Unsecured. There was no Secret Service agent. Like, spare me.
A few things. Well, first of all, I want to point out that I believe it to be deeply unfair for Scott Pelley to ask Joe Biden questions minutes after he just woke him up, because I hadn't actually seen that clip, and I was like, is he in bed? I mean, he's
so mean.
The documents. I mean, this is wild. And the other thing too, to that point, Megyn, is, am I the only one who didn't know that Joe Biden had a think tank? When did
Joe
Biden
not.
get a think tank?
You're
A
not.
guy can barely think for 5 minutes, with one contiguous thought, but he has a think tank. That's really interesting. But I have to actually agree with both Matt and Kmele on this, is that, and you, in the sense that they aren't the same things. They're materially different in a lot of very, very significant ways, but that doesn't make it not a story. And when you have things like this, when you have, Joe Biden going out there and saying I can't imagine anybody doing this sort of thing. And I can imagine you doing something similar, not the same, but similar. And the reaction that you get to this from the media and from people, look, go back and look at the reactions to what Sandy Burglar, who went into the National Archives. It wasn't even stuff that wasn't getting to the National Archives. It was stuff in the National Archives that he attempted to remove in his socks and then pleaded guilty to it. This is not like without precedent or everything.
I have never been able to compost before. It was always too complicated and too much work. Not anymore, thanks to Lomi. Lomi allows me to turn my food scraps into dirt with the push of a button. This is a countertop electric composter that turns scraps to dirt in under 4 hours. There's no smell when it runs, and it's super quiet. Thanks to Lomi, I have way less garbage each week, too. Instead, I turn this waste into nutrient-rich dirt that I can feed to my plants. Now, I'm composting and creating soil with my kids' help instead of creating waste. I have a basically limitless supply of dirt for my garden, and if you would like to join me in this endeavor and start making a positive environmental impact, or just make cleanup after dinner that much easier, Lomi is perfect for you. Go to lomi.com/MK and use the promo code MK to get $50 off your Lomi. That's $50 off when you head to lomi.com/MK. Use that promo code MK at checkout. Food waste is gross. Let Lomi save you a cold trip out to the garbage can. Lomi.com. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.